Hey, I'm Sean. Welcome to Bright Outdoors. Today I want to talk about one of the most challenging barriers we have to accessing our ocean fishery, coastal bar crossings. I want to talk about some of the key parts to coastal bar crossings and how to cross a bar safely. One particular thing that I want to highlight is conditions do change quickly, and be prepared for everything. The first thing you need to think about is understanding the conditions that you're going to be facing. So check the bar report, check the weather forecast, know the best tides. Best time is often at slack tide or an incoming tide to cross. Watch the wave period, the swell height. Bigger swell, typically more dangerous. Shorter wave intervals can be also more dangerous. There's a lot of local knowledge with each bar that we face in Oregon. Knowing some of the intricacies of each individual bars is really important to make sure you know how to cross safely. I want to highly recommend that you go to a Coast Guard bar crossing course. They offer them several times a year. And they're usually, I think I did one a few years back and it was $40 or so. I don't know how much they are now, but I really recommend doing that. I also know that they host them at some, like the Saltwater Sportsman Show, and I believe at the Freshwater, the regular Sportsman Show too. I think there's some classes. So I highly encourage to go to those. And even if you've been to one, I think you should go do it again. They could have new updated information. Some of the jetties are being repaired at places like Garibaldi and the Columbia. That's going to change some of the dynamics with the sandbars and everything out there. So make sure that you're kind of staying up to date on the changing conditions. All right, so the first thing you're always gonna hear when you're going out, if you do a radio check with the Coast Guard, you're gonna hear, wear your life jackets. Lose people every year. Usually it's because they're not wearing their life jackets. So make sure you have those on when you're crossing the bars. Look, if it's flat and you go out there and you wanna take your life jacket off, that's your choice. But wear it when you're crossing that bar, wear that life jacket. It's just an easy insurance. Make sure you don't have anything loose hanging on the back of the boat. It's real easy. Catch a wave set, doubles up on you and it's gonna throw your gear out. Make sure your hatches, everything's stowed. And assign roles. Have one person watching to your port, your starboard, looking for different waves, maybe a wave coming in from another angle. You never know what's gonna happen. Be a head on a swivel when you're exiting a bar. Always do a radio check with the Coast Guard. Make sure your stuff's working, make sure they can hear you, make sure you can hear them, and get an updated report if you can. Obviously, if other people are, having active radio communication, you're gonna hear that, but it's not a bad idea to check your radio too. You don't know if something got corroded, you don't know if something went bad, you might be able to hear, they might not be able to hear you though. If you get into trouble and you're not able to make a call, that's a bad situation. I also recommend having 2 radios at all times. I usually carry a handheld and my fixed mount. So it's not a bad idea, redundancy. You rely on one thing and it fails. You're kind of, hoping your cell phone works. You don't drop that in or get knocked over, whatever it may be. Have an escape plan. If things get too crazy, have a plan. Am I going to push through and then come back and turn around and go back in? Are the intervals wide enough to make that turn and come back in? It really depends, and it really depends on your skill, your boat, the conditions. But the biggest thing is when you're coming up to that bar and you assess the conditions on that bar, do not go out if you're feeling uncomfortable. If you think that it's too large of waves, if you think that it's looking, something like, I'm not feeling comfortable with this, and maybe people on the boat, hey, no, let's go anyway. If you're the captain and you're feeling uncomfortable, don't do it. Just wait till your comfort level, wait till it's something you can handle with your comfort level. Another good suggestion, go out with a buddy boat. Go out with someone who's more experienced maybe, or follow them out, be in constant radio communication, maybe a larger boat, they can break your wakes. If you hop in behind a charter boat, they're gonna blow through a lot of these bigger waves and be able to follow them out a little easier. Also coming back in, same thing. So reading the bar is really important. Identify the channel markers, know the bar you're crossing. Don't cut any corners. A lot of these channel markers are, they're marking shoals. The Columbia has a lot of shoals to the south. You've got things to the north. You got sunken jetties on a low tide, which you shouldn't really be crossing on a super low tide, but there are going to be areas where it's very, very shallow and it can cause a lot of issues. So be aware of that and just understand the bar. Study what you're crossing. Really look for calmer waters. The Columbia is a good example. You can look to the south, look to the center ground, middle grounds, look to the north, and there might be 3 different conditions happening at the same time. You might have breakers to the south, you might have flat conditions to the north, and kind of rougher, maybe moderate conditions to the center. And those might change as you're crossing that bar. Those might alternate. So you really need to, maybe you're accessing through the north And then as you get midway through the bar, which this is a very large bar, almost 3 miles, you may need to transition to the center, the middle grounds, and then maybe even to the south. And it really depends. You're going to have to read it as you exit. These are complex situations with lots of flow, lots of dynamics moving with tides and swell and everything, and wind. You really need to be able to read the situation in the moment. Also, forecasts are not always right. So be prepared and have contingencies. If you're able to fish the river, you might have to do that. Another thing, patience saves boats. Be patient. You don't need to rush out there. The fish are going to be there. So watch for sets of waves. Waves always come in groups. Time your sets. Sit there at buoy 10. If you're crossing the Columbia, sit there, at some of these other bars, watch these waves come in. Spend 5-10 minutes, maybe even longer, and just observe what's happening. Sometimes waves will double up. Sometimes waves, you'll get a section of cross waves coming in, and all kinds of things can happen with that. Just watch and see what is happening with that current situation and the tide and everything like that, and how it's influencing that bar. Every day is literally different. Also, time your run. Watch everything passing, time your run, see if other boats are leaving, see what they're doing. So when you're finally ready to execute the crossing, line up with the channel, keep the bow into the waves at a slow speed, or at least a safe speed. Don't stop or let a wave break over you. And definitely don't if a wave is pushing you up, you need to throttle into it. You need to get over that wave. There's gonna be, you're going to have to just use your best judgment. Crossing a bar, you're taking something into your own hands that you're taking a level of risk that is elevated, and you just need to understand and really know your boat really well. I've crossed in larger boats, smaller boats, jet skis, many platforms, and it's really important to just understand that boat. Spend a lot of time. Don't break your boat in by crossing a bar. When you're coming back in too, always make sure you're watching those following seas. A lot of boats get in trouble when they're not able to match speed with incoming with waves when they're coming in, and they have a situation where they get broached. There's a lot of videos online about boats getting broached, especially those big center consoles down in like Florida and the Gulf, where they essentially lose control, and it buries the nose into the. Basically, you lose control and it buries your nose and swamps your boat, and a lot of times they flip and roll over. So it's very important to ride that wave in. So just check in with everyone on your boat. Make sure everybody's comfortable. Make sure everyone's good. Everyone has their life jacket secured. Everyone's got everything holding on. And work that throttle when you're exiting. Every situation is gonna be different. If you're going on a high tide with a very flat swell, it's probably gonna be sometimes like a lake, and you're gonna be able to just fly across the bar, no issues. But other times it's gonna be a much more difficult crossing, and you're gonna need to really work that throttle. I think doing extra research prior to your trip, understanding the tide series that you're trying to exit and enter on is very, very important. We're always typically looking for, ideally you go out on a low tide slack, and you're spending the incoming tide out there, and you're coming back on high slack. That's personally what I like to do if I'm able to. That's a good scenario for me. It's typically a more difficult crossing in the morning, with an easier crossing in the afternoon. I don't really like the opposite of that. But if you're able to sneak out, mid incoming tide, the worst thing you want to do is exit on an outgoing minus tide. And max ebb, stay away from it. There are situations where it is possible. It's not advised, but it is possible, and it's really, you're gonna have to skill level. You're gonna have to just make these crossings and develop a skill level that you're comfortable with, and understanding your boat, what your boat is capable of. You really need to be able to, if you have a smaller boat like ours is like a little over 22 feet total, so it's not a larger fiberglass boat that can just break through these waves. We really have to be conscious of what we're doing when we're crossing. Now, if you're smaller than 20 feet, or 18, you just need to be really careful. You need to understand you can get into some difficult situations. I've made crossings of the Columbia in an 18 foot. It's not the most fun, but you learn a lot. One thing that I highly recommend, the Coast Guard will recommend this, is have some kind of float plan. Whether you actually physically print out their float plan and fill it out, or you just let someone know who's not going on the trip with you. Hey, you call your family, your friend, a friend, whoever it may be, and you let them know when you're coming back, when you're expected to come back, roughly where you're gonna be, and what, where you're exiting, all the information you need. So that way, if you don't come back, or you don't check in with them, they can make a call and say, hey, I never heard back from so-and-so. They went out here, they left at this time, and I'm worried about them, whatever. It might save your life. You never know. Look, the Columbia River is an extremely dangerous bar crossing. Everyone's aware of this. The important thing is just to understand there are periods where it can be manageable, and you can mitigate some of that risk, understanding the correct conditions to exit and enter that bar. Like I said, what I'm really looking for when I go out is so ideally I'm looking for a 4-foot swell height with 8-second interval minimum. For me, that's kind of what I look for. Now, the rule of thumb is 6 foot, and you want to have a double interval in seconds. So if you have a 6-foot swell, you ideally want a 12-foot interval, and that'll be, safe, comfortable, and, scaling up from there. For me and my boat, I like a 4 foot at 8 seconds. That's a pretty calm ocean. It's a little lumpy for us just because, I don't go out all the time, go out on the weekends. I go out when I can. And that's what I have found that's comfortable with my boat relatively for us. So we shoot for that and below. So things like a 3 foot at 12 seconds, a 2 foot at 15 seconds, those are great days. Those are awesome. And if you're able to get out on a day like that, it mitigates a lot of the tidal factors, especially if there's not a minus tide. If there's a softer tide set, that can be just a fantastic day. And you might be able to cross throughout the whole day with a moderate tide and a nice swell. Be aware, typically we have a typical afternoon winds that come up. This is pretty common, especially in the summer, down at buoy 10. Everybody kind of knows, and most of the time you're getting winds kicking up in the afternoon, and if it's the wrong tide, even in the river, that river can get extremely gnarly and dangerous. So if you're out in the ocean and those winds come up and it's the wrong tide set, don't be out there trying to, oh man, I'm gonna go get all my fish out in the ocean, and then you realize it's actually a minus tide that day and it's in the afternoon and the winds kick up and you are getting beat up trying to come in. If not it's downright dangerous at that point. Be really aware of what you're doing, just understand the whole factor of the day, the whole scenario of the day. So in a recent crossing, we made a crossing at low tide. It was a negative 1.7 and it was just before low tide we crossed. And it was decently kind of bumpy, rough a little bit, not too bad. But we had planned to spend the day out there fishing and come back in at high tide. And the swell for that day was expected to be I believe a 2 foot at 17 seconds. So very, very flat ocean. Almost no wind. This ended up being the case. And one of the apps that I highly recommend that I use, and I think it's been decently accurate, obviously they're not always accurate, is Wind Finder. That one has proved to be pretty good, but again, don't trust just one app. Use multiple apps. Check NOAA, check Wind Finder, Windy, and maybe compare, if they're all three are roughly about the same or similar forecasts, it's a good bet that it's probably going to be similar to that forecast. That forecast is probably going to be more accurate. Now, if they're all different, you got one at, it's 12, it's 7 feet and one at 4 feet and one over here at 5. You're probably going to be a little more wild card. It's probably because the algorithms and the buoys are not all jiving together. So I just want to talk about this because I think that it's fantastic to get out in the ocean and fish. We do have this barrier to entry of getting out there over these bars. So I want to reiterate, do your research, understand what you're getting into. Understand there is an elevated risk factor when you take this step and go out there. But we all assume a level of risk when we do anything in our lives. And if this is what you're choosing to do and you want to do, then try to do it as safely as possible. And just understand what you're getting into. This isn't a casual day down at the river. This is something a little more serious. You need to take it seriously. And it might, it'll be a really fun time. You can have some great times out there, but just be aware. And I just wanted to tell a little story that happened to us years ago. We had a larger hardtop boat and we were making a crossing at Garibaldi, which is kind of a notorious bar. It can be a pretty flat bar. I've seen drift boats out there. I've taken a jet ski out there a few times, but we were making a crossing in our hardtop and we were sitting there watching sets come in, and they were pretty moderate, nothing too crazy for what our boat could handle at the time. And when we finally made our exit, right near the North Jetty, there was a wave that combined. And, you know, I don't know if it doubled in height, but maybe like 1.5 times the height. And we had two choices at that point. We either throttled into it or it could have rolled us back. It was a very steep wave and it comes out of nowhere. And so immediately throttled into it and like kind of launched up over it. But these things happen and you have to be aware that it can happen at any time, and you're accepting that risk when you're going out. So just be aware of that. These things happen. They're going to happen to you out there. They're going to happen to everyone out there. Just be ready for them. Don't turn around when you're crossing. You know, don't back off if you need to. You need to punch through. You need to get out over that bar. And then if it's, you know, too hairy for you, turn around, come back in then. But, you know, don't try to turn around if you get scared and you say, oh my gosh, this is like, that's where you get into trouble. That boat is, you know, punch that boat right through them. Get over that danger zone and then turn around and come back. One other thing also, if you go down there and you have an awesome forecast, everything's looking like it's going to be perfect, and you get down there and that bar is trash, that's it. Day's over, you know. You either wade in the bay, you fish the river if you're able to, go somewhere else, do something else. Have a backup plan though, because, you know, it's happened to me before. It can, you know, you can feel like it kind of ruins your day, but it's just part of it. And so just be ready for that, you know, have a contingency, have a backup. And, you know we can't always do that if the river's closed and the ocean's open, but you just make the best of it and just be prepared for that. Be flexible because anything can change. One thing too is when you're out there, Coast Guard starts calling up and saying, hey, we're going to close the bar to these smaller boats. Then, you know, you might want to hightail it back in and not spend your time out there and get stuck out over that bar, because that'd be a bad day. Hey, I just wanted to throw this video together to kind of educate and share some of the stuff that I've learned over the years and help other people who may be getting into the sport and are curious about going out there. And it's hard to find resources on these things. I highly recommend go to the Coast Guard courses, talk to people that know things, that are experienced, go out with a guide, go out with a charter, and learn as much as you can. But it's important to also get out there and start doing this yourself, because that's the #1 way to learn, and just do it safely. So that's what this video is for, to help teach you to do it safely, help provide any information I can that can be helpful. If one little nugget of information, if anything, you get anything out of this video, please subscribe, please like. It'll help us out and keep getting stuff out for everybody. And I appreciate you watching. Thanks.